That is the U.S. Bombs with their song Academy from their first album, Put Strength in the Final Blow. This is a band that I was obsessed with, completely wore them out at one point. Brings back a lot of memories, though. This is Hexes and Soldiers, episode number 34. My name is Jason. How are you guys? I'd like to give a few shout outs. Let's start with Walt, David, Walter, let's see, Rusty, Mark, Richard, and all the other fine, fantastic individuals that I met at Heat of Battle 8 here in New Orleans at the World War II History Museum. And I suppose I could just get right into that. This would be my first wargaming convention, and in a lot of respects, that's a good thing because I swear if I had gone to one of any of the other major conventions and then gone to this, I may have been a bit disappointed, but as this is my first time, it was way better than I expected. Of course, let me back up. I got to this place, and the first building I walked in, I think had three tables set up and maybe half a dozen individuals. And I'm thinking to myself, do I want to pay $30 for this? And this is going to last 5 minutes? I don't think so. So I talked to the receptionist, and she informed me that the actual building is across the street. You have to remember this World War II museum, if you haven't been, is pretty huge. Buildings everywhere. So I crossed the street, and lo and behold, there was the convention in all its glory. Tables everywhere, war gamers everywhere, stuff everywhere, and I could barely take it all in. So paid my ticket fee, and the lady hands me a grab bag of stuff. I had no idea I was going to be getting this. I just came to see things. Looked in there and was quite pleased, actually, to see what I saw when it comes to a grab bag of stuff. Had a war game in there, a couple books, a magazine, a whole bunch of flyers and handbills and souvenirs and all kinds of things. So that was a pleasant surprise as well. And the first table I got to was the first thing I got hung up on. This would be Shenandoah Studios, for those of you not familiar, has been developing war games for the iOS, and they've got a couple of them: Battle of the Bulge, Drive on Moscow, and now Desert Fox. And they're working on Gettysburg game, which I had been play testing. Well, a gentleman there who I ended up hanging out with for the majority of the con had printed out the physical components for Battle of the Bulge, and I guess I had forgotten how breathtaking the map was for that. And he had it all, the pieces and the rule book and everything. And so I got hung up right away there talking with him and waiting for him to get done playing another gentleman. So when it came my turn, made my drive for the Muse, and he effectively shut me down. But hung out with him the majority of the time. We ended up going to have pizza on Magazine Street here in downtown historic New Orleans. And also, I only live roughly 7 miles away, so there was really no excuse for me not to go to this thing. Of course, while we're eating, had some decent conversation, and Academy Games came up. And interesting thing about that is, you know, when it comes to Conflict of Heroes, it seems like it's getting ignored, but you have things like Freedom, the Underground Railroad popping up. And it's funny that he agreed, but if you say you're not interested in playing or anything to do with Freedom, the Underground Railroad, does that make you politically incorrect? Is that to say you are a racist because you don't care about this game? God, I hope not. Otherwise, all the wonderful reviews that this thing has been getting and all the people that have been buying this thing, I guess they're doing it because they're suffering from some sort of historic guilt on the part of our ancestors and the role that they played in the whole slavery thing. I don't know. Probably looking too deeply into this. But anyway, I got a few laughs out of that. And went back to the con and took tons of pictures. I didn't post every single one of them, but took a lot of pictures and put them up. And a lot of miniatures games at this thing. And I think people here in the South really dig their miniatures. That's fine. As I mentioned on Hexes and Soldiers.blogspot.com, would have liked to see a little more cardboard combat. Again, there was no ASL, no OCS, and Also, you have to remember that this thing, for some strange reason, the war games that are brought to this thing and played have to involve or revolve around America in some way. It can be any time period, but you can't do the Eastern Front, which cuts out a whole chunk of stuff. My favorite topic. But that's okay. There was enough stuff anyway, and Civil War stuff, and World War II stuff, Vietnam stuff, stuff, even a giant World War One trench game. So overall, the con was a success. Yes, I will go back. And if you're a game master and you bring a game and set it up and host it, you get to get in for free. But then again, you don't get a free grab bag of stuff. So I don't know. But yeah, I think next year I'll host my own game, and not sure what that will be, but that will ensure that at least one more game worth of cardboard is represented. So again, Heat of Battle number 8, a success. And again, I'd like to give a hearty shout out to everybody that I met there. Some of you I forgot your names. That is completely embarrassing, especially the gentleman who I went to have pizza with and played the Battle of the Bulge game. Hey, I hope you're doing well. It was a pleasure to meet you, and for the love of God, I forgot your name. But that's not surprising considering it's me. So yeah, Heated Battle was a success. What else? I think I'm going to petition an official change in the name that is FedEx and see if I can't get that to become Fed Up, because Eisenbach Gap, a game that I won on eBay, not only did it take forever to show up, and when it finally showed up, check the tracking number, shows that it was delivered and signed for. Go to the mailroom. I don't have my own front door mailbox. I live on campus here, so I have to go to the mailroom to get everything. Go to pick this baby up, but it's not there. Nobody knows where it is. Mailroom doesn't have it. FedEx says they delivered it. They don't know where it is. So there is a copy of Lock and Load Eisenbach Gap floating somewhere around New Orleans. I don't know if it's lost or somebody else is enjoying it, but whenever they're done with it, if they could return it to the rightful owner, that would be greatly appreciated. And so that's pretty much it with me. As far as wargaming and stuff that I've been up to, pretty much just the usual. So I'll move right along and head for the news. And as far as the news goes, we've got M&P having their special ops issue number 5 is up for grabs. This thing looks okay, I guess. I may take a pass on it. I have all of the others, though. This has 6 articles, 2 ASL scenarios, 2 ASL starter kit scenarios, an ASL map board. Okay, now maybe I have to get it. And the Battle of Bushy Run. Featured articles cover ASL, Angola, Lincoln's War, Storm over Dien Bien Phu, A Last Chance for Victory, which is a game that, in my impression, is picking up traction amongst the wargaming community, and as well, It Never Snows. The Battle of Bushy Run game uses a simplified version of Iwo Jima Rage Against the Marines, which appeared in Operations Special Magazine issue number 1. And this would be an American Indian game that deals with American Indian units which use a concealed map and have dummy units to help hide their movements. So, can this effectively be played solitaire? It's going to be a challenge. The British force is a mix of soldiers, grenadiers, and scouts who can reveal hidden Indian units. And to increase replayability, there are random events each turn. Let's see, 8 turns. 10 event chits, so 2 are not played each game, and their identity is not revealed. They say their identify is not revealed. Both sides have multiple ways in which they can secure victory, so interested readers can find even more information on the Battle of Bushy Run official website. It also says in July of 1763, Fort Pitt, now Pittsburgh, was under siege as part of Pontiac's rebellion. A relief column was sent out from Carlisle in order to try and break the siege. The column was under the command of Colonel Henry Bouquet and consisted of approximately 500 British soldiers of the 42nd Highlanders, 77th Highlanders, and 60th Royal Americans. Then on August 5th, several hundred Indian warriors of the Delaware, Shawnee, Mingo, and Huron tribes attacked the column east of Bushy Run Station. The British held out, and that night a redoubt was constructed from the supplies, and the wounded retreated inside this perimeter. The next day, the Indians attacked again, and a British counterattack broke the Indians. The British column was able to advance and relieve Fort Pitt on August 10th. So there it is, the Battle of Bushy Run, dealing with a topic that I have little to no interest in, but that's my problem, I suppose. Then new from High Flying Dice Games, Valor Ad Vengeance is a two-player game on the Battle of Uluskert during the Second Chechen War. This is something I have a little more interest in. At Uluskert, the Russian 6th Company, 2nd Battalion, 104th Guards Parachute Regiment sought to block the retreat route of some 2,000 lightly armed Chechens, supported by Su-25 aircraft, Mi-24 helicopter gunships, and artillery. The Russians presumed superiority over a cunning foe. The Chechen forces concentrated in the town of Uluskert before taking on the Russians, and this was an area the Russians dared not enter during the First Chechen War. Cost you about 18 bucks. Mounted counters are $5 extra. And also for those of you that do print and play stuff and have to mount your own counters, I read an interesting thing that would simplify your life. And if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, they have these, I don't know, foot by foot square tiles of flooring. And what you do is most of this stuff has an adhesive back, so you peel off the back, stick your sheet on there, and then X-Acto out your pieces. Thought that was a fairly simple way to deal with that. So another thing that has popped up this year is, I believe, the first two games of the first two. The third one I don't think is out yet. First two games of the Finnish trilogy, 1939 to 45. And two games, one expansion. I don't think the expansion's available yet. It's an operational level game that will be about the Finnish struggle during various parts of the Second World War. And all three games have the same rule system, apart from a few special rules in each of them. And many of the game's mechanics are measured in battalion equivalents, such as zone of control, transportation, and rail capacity. And all games in the trilogy suits very well for 1, 2 players, 3 players in Volume 3 Lapland War, or teams at an age of 13 or over. Time scale: each turn represents 7 to 8 days, or roughly 1 week of real time. So each month is divided into 4 parts. And a map scale: each hex represents about 15 kilometers, or a little over 9 miles across. Unit scales: the ground units on the Finnish-German side are companies, batteries, and battalions, while the units on the Soviet side are regiments and brigades. Added to this are Army, Corps, divisional headquarters, to name but a few. Air unit counters simulate roughly between 8 to 16 air units, while the naval counters simulate between 1 large vessels to 10 various flotillas. Very often players move only headquarters on the map board, while the actual units are kept aside in special headquarters breakdown boxes. And this creates a fog of war feeling, since the players may not examine each other's stacks unless adjacent or spotted by any kind of a recon unit, ground unit, or air unit. All units will be in 12.5 millimeter by 12.5 millimeter, or half inch by half inch. Most of the units and markers have information on both sides, and some info of the combat system. You've got each ground unit has a colored box in their upper left corner, and the color of the box is based on the size of the unit. Now here's where it gets interesting. A green box will be on all companies, batteries, and backsides, or the weaker side of battalions. A blue box on all battalions and backsides of regiments. A red box on all regiments and backsides of brigades. And finally, a black box on all brigades, or the front side. The boxes refer to the dice that are used when, for example, solving combat. And each colored die has a unique numbering, and they run through the dice, which consists of green, blue, red, black, and white. And each are numbered in a specific way, and I'll just read one. For example, the green die will have a 0, a 0, a 0, and then a 1 and a 1 and a 1, if that gives you any idea of what you're dealing with. Each ground unit has a written combat value, sort of a basic value, and to this are added the box in a combat, both in attack and defense. This means that you never know for sure the final combat value of your own units and the enemy units. You can also affect or influence the box die roll by various modifiers, which is what they call combined arms and logistic. And I really like the combined arms and logistic mechanic. A player doesn't roll a colored die for each unit in an attack or defense. Rather, the focus is on the whole stack. And this only makes sense when you read it. Each stack separately if the attacker attacks from more than one hex. A combat example, here we go. When the attacker announces where he or she wants to attack, the defender determines whether to use static defense or mobile defense, and the difference is on the two separate combat tables that are included. More retreat results in the mobile defense, but both the attacker and the defender counts the written or basic combat values of all the units engaging in the combat. Usually companies have a H or half combat factor, and units with a 0 as its basic value are totally relied on the forthcoming combined arms and logistic result. So what you're going to do is check the what they call combined arms and logistic status in each stack. That's attacker and defender. And the combined arms logistic is divided into four main categories: infantry, artillery, armored fighting vehicles, and headquarters. All units have one of these four main unit categories shown in their upper left corner for easy reference to what category they belong. And if the hex includes only one category, you get a -1 modifier on each colored die. If your hex includes two of these categories, there's no modifier. For three categories, you get a +1 modifier, and for four or all categories, you get a +2 modifier. So then you throw a die for each box color on the attack and defense and use the same CAL modifier for all dice. So the Soviet player attacks with four red boxes, front side of a regiment, two blue boxes, which would be one back side of a regiment and one front side of a divisional headquarters, and one black box, or rather front side of a brigade. He's going to throw a blue, a red, and a black die. And let's say that the CAL modifier is +1 because the attack included three different categories, meaning that each result on the blue, red, and black die is added with 1. So then you multiply the result of each colored die after modifier with the number of units bearing that colored box and add the result to the total. You determine the odds ratio and consult the odds ratio combat table. You make column shifts depending on terrain, winterization, etc. Finally, the attack rolls a white die to see the final result. And this might sound cumbersome, especially as this is probably the first time most of you have heard anything about this, but it actually works out quite well. That was pretty interesting. And then they say the more categories you have in an attack and a defense, preferably all four, the more effective your units in the stack will be naturally, and the more you can control the final firepower of your own units. And each unit category is not always allowed to use its CAL, depending on especially terrain. So if you're interested in the Finnish action that took place during World War II, or just a very cool operational level game with a very interesting mechanic as far as combat, among other things, pick this up. But a warning, I don't think it's cheap, so be prepared for a hefty price tag. And then I usually harp on or just ignore Avalanche Press, but I went to their site recently, and just mainly out of curiosity. I didn't buy anything, and nothing really perked my interest to the extreme, but they're trying. I'm going to give them credit for that. They are trying. They got this new game out that is called Panzer Grenadier Kursk, Burning Tigers for the Panzer Grenadier system. And while the SS assault the Kursk salient from the south, German plans had the Ninth Army hurling three Panzer Corps against the Bulge's northern flank. With weeks to prepare, the Soviet 13th Army had dug in with multiple lines of anti-tank guns, and once the Germans broke through, they had to face the Second Tank Army. Kursk Burning Tigers is a standalone game in the Panzer Grenadier series. You do not need any other game in the series to play any of the 40 scenarios. And they say design is by Panzer Grenadier veteran Mike Perryman. In this game, the German army wields new weapons for its long-planned offensive. Panther tanks, Ferdinand tank destroyers, Goliath explosive tanks, and more are in the German arsenal. The Soviets counter with masses of the excellent T-34 medium tank, plus Lend-Lease Churchill tanks, T-70 light tanks, and much more. There are 4 semi-rigid map boards, just like those found in August 1914 or 1940, The Fall of France, which is another game that I looked at, and the map boards on this were fairly interesting. They kind of present a three-dimensional view of towns and cities. Not bad, actually. They say plus 517 scorchless and sootless playing pieces and 40 scenarios. So this game and its companion South Flank are exactly the games for which the Panzer Grenadier series was intended. These are the ultimate tank battles that every Panzer Grenadier player will want to fight. And regarding Avalanche Press, I also give them credit, or somebody, because there is a list of games that are out of print, I guess. And the guy talks about this, and he'll admit, he'll say, with this game, I don't know what I was thinking. I would never do it again. It's a very honest account as you go through it, and I appreciate that because, admittedly, Avalanche Press does have some production issues for whatever reason. I won't go into it. So that's interesting that this gentleman admits these issues. So I thought, maybe Avalanche Press, Panzer Grenadier, maybe this company, this system deserves a second look. I know there are people out there that are big fans of this and play it and would swear by it. But so yeah, I thought I'd give Avalanche Press their due, which I've yet to do yet. But then there was an article. It's called 1940: The Fall of France: Hitler's Secret Weapon by Mike Benighoff, and I remember talking about German troops using performance enhancers, if you will. And there have been rumors about this for years. But there's an article about this I thought I'd share. A pretty brief article, but it starts within months of the 1940 fall of France. Scholars were trying to find an explanation for the French army's rapid defeat. Marc Bloch, one of the field's most influential thinkers, wrote his Strange Defeat in the months following the campaign. It was published in 46, 2 years after he was tortured and murdered by the Germans. And this guy Bloch would be the first of many to consider the puzzling question, with the French holding such a military superior hand in terms of numbers and often quality of troops, guns, tanks, and aircraft. Just how did the Germans manage to win such a quick and total victory in the late spring of 1940? Well, here's yet another hypothesis. Bloch saw the problem almost exclusively from a French perspective. France, less because of weakness in her culture, her politics, and most of all in her complacent military establishment. A number of hypotheses have been advanced over the intervening decades, blaming communists and socialists for undermining French national will, looking at the decade of French culture, the lack of a modern French doctrine for the use of armor, or the presence of a German one. Greater German firepower has been cited as well, thanks to the destruction of most of the old Imperial Army's field artillery after the Great War. German divisions marched to war backed by fairly new 105mm howitzers, while the French still fielded the venerable 75mm. And he says, my friend Jenny Keisling, in her book Arming Against Hitler, argues that the French pretty much did all that they could be expected to do to prepare for war, given what they knew at the time. She makes a strong case in most critiques of the French military reliance of 1940 on hindsight. French leaders could not have foreseen a number of factors, including the German willingness to send their troops into battle geeked up on crystal meth. That's what she says, end quote. Akira Ogawa, a Japanese chemist, synthesized a crystallized form of methamphetamine in 1919, reducing ephedrine using iodine and red phosphorus, more or less the same process used in my neighborhood today. In 1938, a Berlin pharmaceutical firm, Timler Werke, synthesized a form of methamphetamine the firm marketed under the trade name Pervitin. And Pervitin came in a chocolate-flavored tablet and instantly became a runaway hit on the German market. The next year, Otto Ranke, a doctor at the Academy of Military Medicine, began testing Pervitin's suitability for military use. This guy gave the drug to 90 university students and recorded good effects. I'm sure they all made straight A's and probably trashed their rooms. But the drug gave the subjects greatly increased alertness, aggression, self-confidence, and focus, while cutting back on their need for food, drink, and sleep. In short, it promised enormous benefits for soldiers. But Ranke was still not convinced. During the invasion of Poland, distribution was limited to army truck drivers who performed well under the influence. And based on the results seen in the Polish campaign, the army ordered full production taking delivery of somewhere between 35 and 40 million tablets between April and June of 1940. Tank crews and pilots had priority for the drug and tweaked their way through the French in record time. The drug did everything Rank tested promised and more. German soldiers outfought and outmarched their enemies using Pervitin to boost confidence, aggression, and most of all to drive away the need for sleep. German tankers gobbled up their Panzer chocolate and roared across France with scarcely a pause for rest. One tablet gave the same effect as liters of coffee, wrote the young soldier Heinrich Boll, later to become Germany's first winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. And I have a couple of this gentleman's books. While the Germans saw a marked improvement in performance that led directly to their victory over the French, they also logged a shocking number of side effects. Young, seemingly healthy soldiers dropped dead of heart failure. Others experienced psychotic episodes and committed suicide. Many of those who did not die or take their own lives experienced hallucinations, massive sweating, circulation disorders, dizziness, and depression. For the invasion of the Soviet Union, the German armed forces ordered another 10 million tablets, this time funneling distribution through army doctors. Pervitin continued in the German arsenal until the end of the war, though not on as grand a scale as in 1940. Minister of Health Leonardo Conti, alarmed by the reports of side effects, enacted restrictions on the drug's distribution in July of 41. Soldier addicts begged for Pervitin to be sent from home, and a thriving black market developed for the drug. The tweaking went on all the way to the top of the Nazi hierarchy. Though abstaining from alcohol, Mr. Adolf Hitler increasingly relied on Pervitin injections starting in 42 and continuing until shortly before his cowardly suicide. Finnish soldiers got their sisu in tablet form as well. This is according to this person, not me. The Finnish army issued Pervitin to its soldiers in large amounts, a thought that put some of the tales of epic Finnish fighting spirit in a different light. In Japan, Nippon Pharmaceuticals manufactured massive amounts of crystal meth under the trade name Philopin, and the armed forces issued it to both fighting troops and industrial workers. Kamikaze pilots in particular were encouraged to make use of the drug. Huge stocks of Philopin fell into the American hands at the end of the war to be sold off and formed the root of a major post-war epidemic on both sides of the Pacific. Finally, it says Mark Bloch blamed French decadence, and Ernest May credited imaginative German planning. Both overlooked the German secret weapon of 1940. So I thought that was interesting. And then the bulk of the show will consist of a discussion about miniatures, a subject that I have tiptoed around effectively, not for any real reason, but I figured I'd plant my feet firmly on this subject for a change. And I'm not going to profess to know an overwhelming bulk of information regarding this. My knowledge is limited when it comes to this, but I do have my favorites, and there are a ton of miniatures rules out there. You've got, as I run down the list in no particular order, start with Bolt Action, and this came out in 2012 by Osprey Publishing, joined with Warlord Games, but it's written by veteran game designer Alessio Cavatore and Rick Priestley. Bolt Action provides all the rules needed to bring the great battles of World War II to your tabletop, using miniature soldiers, tanks, and terrain, so you can fight battles in the shattered towns of occupied France, the barren deserts of North Africa, and even the sweltering jungles of the Pacific. Players get to decide which of the major or minor World War II powers they would like to represent, and then construct their armies from the list provided. Army options are almost limitless, allowing you to build the kind of army that most appeals to your style of play, and the choice, they say, is yours. And I have a copy of this book. I've read through it, don't have a big problem with it. Played a couple of dry run games, and thought it was interesting. This would be a more soldier to soldier type fighting rather than squad to squad or platoon to platoon. You deal with orders in activating your troops and lots of dice. But again, I didn't have a problem with it. And of course, Warlord Games has their own miniatures that you can acquire and use for bolt action. Then you have, and this seems to be quite popular, the bolt action. But then you also have another one that seems to be quite popular, or gaining ground. And this is the battle group rules and game supplements. You've got, I think, started out with Battle Group Kursk in 2012 with Iron Fist Publishing and Plastic Soldier Company. And this is an innovative game system for recreating the epic battles around Kursk and 43 on the Eastern Front. And now they have other theaters that you can game. I think there's a Normandy or D-Day one, among others. And these fast, fun, and authentic feeling rules, written by veteran games designer Warwick Kinrod, who was author of Kampf Group Normandy, are designed to play at 15 millimeter and 20 millimeter scales. 4 detailed army lists are included, German panzer and infantry divisions, to face the Russian tank corps and rifle divisions across a series of scenarios or a short campaign. The inglorious 12th of July for the savage tank battles at Prokhorovka. Says this is extensively researched background and comprehensive equipment data with a comprehensive modeling and painting guide section. That is Battle Group Kursk. And I might add, a lot of people say, I would play this stuff, but I'm not going to spend time gluing together pieces or painting things. But admittedly, for a lot of people, perhaps the majority of people that game miniatures, that, believe it or not, is part of the appeal. And I can attest to that. Spent many an hour painting Flames of War figures, and much to the chagrin of my girlfriend, but that's how it goes. That brings us to Chain of Command, one that I'm less familiar with. That's 2013. Two Fat Lardies. Again, I know little to nothing about this, but that is an option. Nuts is another option. This is a light and easy game, though pretty realistic, with an innovative reaction system. No rigid turn sequence due to the reactions, and your soldiers have a bit of their own initiative, and you don't always control them 100% of the time. They sometimes don't do what you'd like them to do. They sometimes open opportunity fire, etc. You have something called the Face of Battle, and this game is in fact fairly realistic. And the book itself seems to be big and scary, but really you'll only be needing a part of it for most of your games. It's a great modular rule book. You can add as many advanced rules as you feel like. Crouching, crawling, fog of war, identification of targets, ski troopers, night fighting. But in most cases, you won't need those. The game is very intuitive, and if one person knows the rules and the others just use common sense to decide what to do, they have good chances of success. So then you have Baptism of Fire, another one. What's pretty cool about this rule set is that it focuses on the human factor in the battle more than equipment, and it has an interesting morale system where the soldiers sometimes panic, go jumpy, and open fire on closest targets, become pinned, sometimes very motivated to do better, etc. And you also don't know how many of your orders are going to get executed because the soldiers, after all, are only human. And the previous three are suitable for, I guess, the 10 to 28 millimeter range. Sergeants, a game I've looked at but haven't played. The game combines elements of board games and miniatures in a system that is card driven. And the cards drive the impulses that take place during each turn, and each player has a deck of cards made up from the troops under his or her command. Each soldier's deck of cards reflects abilities and traits, perhaps about how well they shoot, or how slowly they move, or how attracted they are to things like fresh milk, hot food, or loot. There are some soldiers called characters included in the base game, Day of Days, which are common, but the others in Day of Days and all that are purchased separately have unique characteristics, which all balance out to be equal according to a complex math formula which is seamless to the players. So players can only get the best out of their forces after they have learned each soldier's strengths and weaknesses. Day of Days includes movable mapboard tiles, hand-painted 20mm miniatures, scenarios, cards, and everything needed to play. Additional soldiers give more choices and more fun. That is Sergeants. And then before I get to the obvious, you also have board games that can be adapted to miniatures. I've done this with Conflict of Heroes to great effect, and I suppose you could do this with Band of Brothers. There's a number of lock and load games actually that you could do this with. But then also you have probably the most obvious choice, and that would be Flames of War. And not just because quote unquote everybody plays it or it's been around for a while, or actually that may have something to do with it. It is time tested, and I have to say, of just about any game, miniatures or cardboard even for that matter, except for say perhaps the OCS series or ASL, for some reason the tri-letter acronym games seem to be catered to quite well and intended to. But as far as an overall game system that really, this company should get an award for their ongoing support of this game, because honestly, they are just trucking along. I think there are 3 editions of this now. The first edition probably flew a bit under the radar. With the second edition, it really took off running, and it did so well they put out a third edition. I think probably just for money purposes, maybe just to polish a few things. There was nothing wrong with the second edition stuff that is out. In fact, if you want to go that route, there's no problem in doing so. Third edition stuff's probably going to be a bit more expensive. But and ways to break into this game again are better than ever. You've got the old school little open fire, I think is what it was called, package deal. But also they have a newer thing, I believe it's still called open fire. And this thing has a ton of Allied tanks, some German tanks, Allied paratroopers, German Panzer Grenadiers, I believe, even I think it's a V2 flying rocket as a objective you can try and achieve. All kinds of stuff. Dice. I think it's about $70, which is a great deal. And the soldiers are plastic. Typically they're metal, but I think advances in plastics technology is allowing a smaller and greater detail when it comes to mass producing these things. And looking at the soldiers, let me back up. I have played this game a ton, and I have literally a ton of stuff. Now, it's not here in New Orleans with me for space purposes, it's in storage. But again, I've got a ton of this stuff. I spent hours painting it, hours playing it, and I would recommend it to anybody. But one of the things that appeals to me regarding this newer open fire kit is that the soldiers are plastic, and the detail of these things is super impressive. The guys look great. Facing the possibility of getting this and painting it again, probably not going to happen, but I might get this for posterity purposes. It would be something that I could have easily contained, easily stored, and yet allow me to game Flames of War when I got that itch in a small place such as where I live. So I may end up doing that, but definitely not going to order it FedEx because I don't trust FedEx anymore, and I may even get a PO box as I'm starting to hold the mailroom suspect. This is the second time I've had a problem with something, and I'm starting to become a little curious. Never had a problem with the mail before. Move here, and I'm starting to have problems. So, but that's another story. But back to Flames of War. This would be my recommendation. Again, it also depends on what you want to game. You want to game more larger scale events with companies, platoons, etc. Flames of War is what you want. If you want something a little more personal, man to man type thing, I would say Bolt Action. Give that a shot. Overall, hands down, Flames of War. It's where it's at. I'm sorry. I know there are probably many of you that are sick of hearing about it, that don't agree, that are burnt out on it. I get that, but honestly, this is the route to go. Flames of War. Again, I played it. I love the way it plays. It's not overly complex, and I like the way it plays. So that would be my recommendation. Which brings us to, and I severely apologize for glossing over this stuff, but honestly, there's just so much to cover. And I thought I would do two separate shows with two different eras, but I'm going to go ahead and combine the Napoleonics element with this show and just keep it all a miniatures show. But when it comes to Napoleonic stuff, again, a number of options, probably more options than any other era or game out there. It's just endless, and this stuff is continuing to be pumped out, Napoleonics rules. But the one that has intrigued me the most, one that I've read about ceaselessly and have been unsuccessful in obtaining, is the Napoleon at War rules. It came out in 2011. In Napoleon at War, you command your forces the size of a division. And again, when it comes to deciding what rule set is best for you, it is very important to determine which size battle you wish to recreate. So this would deal with the size of a division, and to play this you'll need an army organized according to one of the campaign manuals, made up of a good number of 18 millimeter Napoleon at War miniatures, and they do produce their own range of miniatures for this rule set. Measuring tape typically used. I created for the game that I'm working on, Napoleonic. I guess you could call it miniatures game, but I've been incorporating blocks. But other than that, it's basically a straight up miniatures game. I made little measuring sticks with inch by inch scale. So you would have a wooden stick basically with an inch long black stripe, then an inch long white stripe, then an inch long black stripe. And I think I have a 12-inch stick, a 6-inch stick, and a 3-inch stick, and that I don't know, tape measure thing works fine, but I'm a big stickler for aesthetic, and I don't know, using a tape measure makes me think I'm gonna hang drywall or something. So, ixnayed that. Yeah, I know I got problems. See, a measuring tape and a good number of dice, and this is when they say a good number of dice, yeah, they mean that typical six-sided dice or D6s, as they're commonly known. And the whole premise with this Napoleon at War thing is based on the Flames of War system, but it's Napoleonics, and that intrigues me because I'm a big fan of the Flames of War system. But again, like I said, I've been unable to locate a rule book, and I'm reluctant to order it overseas and pay a ton of shipping and wait forever. But hopefully, somebody will have a copy of this available at some point, and I can check it out. But with Napoleon at War, you can recreate important battles of the Napoleonic Wars in your own living room. You can command a terrible division of French cuirassiers or a firm red line of determined British infantry. Which is your favorite army? Brings us to black powder, which is another rule system that can be applied to Napoleonics and is a favorite among many Napoleonics enthusiasts. Again, I don't have a copy of this either. I looked at it online though. Seems to be okay. Fields of Glory, I do own a copy of this rule book, and it is fairly involved. I don't know if this is comparable to most of the Napoleonics rule systems, but this Fields of Glory stuff might be about as detailed as you want to get with a Napoleonics game. Otherwise, you're never going to play. You're just going to be consulting the rule book all the time. But this came out in 2012, written in an approachable and easy to learn, they say, manner to allow players to concentrate on realistic deployments and battlefield tactics of the early modern era. This will cater for both types of players with a full point system allowing theoretical battles between balanced armies to be played out as well as accommodating factual scenarios. The rulebook maintains the same production values as previous Field of Glory releases and will be designed both to explain the game and to be a reference guide when playing. To make the rules easier to follow, they include examples, which they do liberally, and detailed descriptions and explanations of unusual situations in a similar way to their Ancients and Renaissance rule books. Based on the core mechanics of its predecessors, Field of Glory Napoleonic is a tabletop miniatures game that allows players to command the armies of any of the nations involved in the Napoleonic and French Revolutionary Wars, emphasizing the combined arms tactics that dominated the battlefields of the period. Players will deploy cavalry, infantry, and artillery units to move, fire, and assault their way to victory. And I would recommend this as well as, and this might sound odd as I haven't played it, the Napoleon at War rules series. And one of the reasons I can recommend the Napoleon at War rules series is because, and here's where I give a free plug to another podcast, Meeples and Miniatures. And never thought I would say this, but I've listened to a couple of these shows, and I think Meeples is a misleading title. But if you go to the Meeples and Miniatures site, I forget which episode it is. The guy has a gentleman come on and describes the Napoleon at War rules in depth. I mean, I wonder if I even need to buy this thing. The guy goes into such detail. And that is how I can say yay or nay. It is a great account of a rule system. And if you're curious, go to the Meeples and Miniatures site, listen to the episode that deals with Napoleon at War. Probably one of the most detailed accounts of a rule system I have heard. Very impressive. So, besides that, Fields of Glory I own and have gamed. Again, it's about as detailed as I personally would care to get. Anything more would just be insanity. But hey, there are those out there that require more, so this may not be for you, but honestly, I don't know how much more detailed you want to get. That's Fields of Glory. And then a couple of standbys, and I think that will do it. General de Brigade, this is a classic standby. Napoleonic War Games rules for infantry battalions, cavalry regiments, and artillery batteries as the basic tactical units to figure scale as 1 to 20. Over the years, you've got various sets of Napoleonic War Games rules that are available. Some good, others too complicated, others simply not Napoleonic. And this is again, you can apply the Goldilocks test. You know, this too much of this, not enough of this. But for a lot of people, General de Brigade is right where it's at. It's just right. Most, however, are split into two very separate camps, those aimed at battalion level and those aimed at army level with little or no middle ground between the two. So General de Brigade was designed to combine the appeal of battalion-based games with the most important aspects of command and control from Army level games. It was important, therefore, to base the game at the correct level with the military structure. In order to achieve this, the division seemed the most suitable level. When players field a division, they are in command of a number of brigades, and it is to this level that most wargamers are suited. This is because after spending hours researching and painting their armies, they want to maneuver each and every unit, overseeing their every volley, melee, and morale test at brigade level. This is exactly what is expected of the commander. He'd be concerned with deployment, formation, and when to fire. And here, formations such as column or line do matter, as do they also matter in the game that I'm designing. However, the use of brigades and brigade orders introduces a command and control factor that limits the nippy little battalion syndrome and restricts the wargamer from doing whatever he wants with any unit whenever it suits him. And this rule system allows wargamers the freedom to command and maneuver each battalion or squadron, but also includes higher command decisions such as brigade objectives, the timing of assaults, and the deployment of reserves. And that brings us to, finally, LaSalle, which is a game for 2 or more players and rule set rather, and is the first game in the Honor series. Players take the role of a brigade or division commander in the Napoleonic Wars. It's a small scale, tactical in nature, focuses on the movement of individual battalions and regiments of cavalry. The player will manage a small force of roughly a dozen units as he tries to complete some specific mission assigned to him, such as hold the village and our bridgehead at all costs, or drive the French from Plancenoit. From the publisher's website, it says LaSalle is ideal for a small gaming table, and it plays in real time with most battle lasting 2 to 3 hours. Perfect for pickup games or tournament play. Therefore includes sample army lists, enabling players to collect and paint typical small forces from a large number of possible nationalities. And if you have a club or a larger collection and gaming area, LaSalle can also be used to simulate historical battles of the Napoleonic Wars, such as Quatre Bras, Albras, Saalfeld, or Egmont. And in these cases, multiple players with multiple forces and a larger table will allow your group to simulate the excitement of a significant battle. And then also you can use quite effectively the commands and colors Napoleonic's system for miniatures. And of course, when it comes to miniatures, there's no end. There's ancients. You also have Civil War stuff you can do. Vietnam. I mean, anything that can be gamed can be miniaturized. And so that pretty much covers the Napoleonics and World War II stuff. I've left a ton of stuff out as usual. I just can't cover it all. But to recap, when it comes to World War II, I recommend Flames of War highly, and I would recommend this to just about anybody, be it someone who is new or someone who is veteran. It's the way to go. It's sort of that bolt action for a different scale. This is just fine and dandy in my book. And then when it comes to Napoleonic stuff, Napoleon at War, as well as Fields of Glory Napoleonics. Either of those would be great systems to game with. Again, there are just endless amounts of Napoleonics warfare rules to choose from. That is just a couple. Again, you also have General de Brigade, who a lot of people like, as well as LaSalle, and the list goes on and on. You pretty much just have to decide for yourself. You got to get out there. You're going to have to get your hands dirty. You're going to have to get your feet wet. It's okay. You might find something you don't like. Move on. Try something else. But you're going to have to get your hands dirty and figure it out on your own because everybody has different tastes. So that about covers it. A bit more brief than I had hoped, but just so much to cover and so little time. So as far as the next show goes, I'm not exactly sure what I will cover. That Kursk episode needs to happen in a big way, so that might be happening, but I'm not going to guarantee that. So that does do it for this show, and I might add that this show has a happy ending, as just a second ago I paused and went to check the mailroom, and guess what? My game was there, so the world is a wonderful place once again. Thanks for listening, and keep gaming.